Okay, here's another episode of Rental House versus High Income ETFs. This is episode 9.2. And if you are a regular viewer and wonder episode 9.1 went to or what happened to it, there wasn't any because Robinhood didn't display my distribution last week until almost the middle of the week. So by the time the distribution popped up and by the time I updated my charts and everything, it was already like Wednesday. So at that point, I didn't want to make a video, then 2 days later make another video. But anyhow, it did pop up and get displayed, and then the new one for this week that got distributed showed up today was Friday, and it did show up on time. So this is 2 weeks worth of data. So you're getting double the fun for the price of one admission. Once again, I like to remind everybody, if you're new to this series of videos, we've sold most of our rental properties. One of these last pieces of properties, we sold one of these houses. We took the money and invested into some covered call ETFs. That was back in November of 2024, approximately. And we've been comparing how this would do versus if we would have kept that house. My thought process was that it would do a whole lot better. The reason why I thought so is because we've been selling some properties even before then, and I was putting some money into some high income ETFs, covered call ETFs, some BDCs, some preferred stock ETFs, some different things. And we were earning, probably averaging like 12%, I would say, on dividend returns. I say average because that's actually including a whole bunch of money in the S&P 500 and QQQ. I'm talking about 3/4 of our money into those and about a quarter of our money into the high income ETFs of different varieties. But anyhow, let's forget all about that for a moment. What this is focused on is I created a dedicated account in Robinhood and decided to use margin to boost my return. And my goal and my prediction was that the ETFs would just blow the house out of the water. And if it wasn't for tariffs in China and Canada and all these other things, it'd probably be doing a whole lot better. So let's get to it here. But before we get to it, I'd love it if you would subscribe. That way you could follow the series of videos. And if you notice, my channel is a variety of everything from traveling to bicycling to digging up tombstones and cemeteries and all kinds of goofy things. It's just all my hobbies wrapped up into one. I was going to have separate YouTube channels for different things, but don't know if it's too much work or not. At some point, if this channel gets big enough and it's monetized, I might divide it up into different things, but that's not really my goal. My goal is to just share random stuff on the internet. So anyhow, getting to the good stuff here. So my account is at 78,148. So we started out at 70,000 back in November, and it's finally in the green. It was in the red there for a while. We'll look at that more here in a second. And I'm using margin. I'm using 69,421. And some people are like, oh my gosh, oh, your margin's horrible. I look at margin as like a loan against rental property or home equity line of credit. So when you have rental property, you might put down 25% and then you borrow 75%. $100,000 home, you put down 25,000, you borrow 75,000. So you only have $25,000 in equity. Me, I got 78,000 in equity and I'm borrowing 69,000. So to me, it's fine. When I understand the rules of margin and the margin maintenance and all that stuff, and I'm well aware of all those things. And my margin interest is like 5.75%, a little bit under 6%, I believe, which is one of the reasons why I'm using Robinhood. It has low margin rates. So what do I exactly have my money invested in? So we'll start with the big amount here. We have 2,700 shares of QDTE that pays every Friday. We have 650 shares of AIPI that pays once a month around the 25th or so. We have 100 shares of QQQI that also pays into the month. 200 shares of SPY-I, that's 200 shares, 500 shares of GIAX, which they sent me a free hat because they love me so much. I suppose I bought 1,000 shares, they would have sent me 2 hats. Who knows? But anyhow, yeah, to be honest, I was like worried about that at first, and I decided I wasn't going to buy any more GIAX, and it dropped down to 14 something, and I went ahead and bought like another couple hundred shares, and then it's bounced back, and then it's been paying that return of about 24% per month. I'm a fan again. So we'll look at that more here in a second. But overall, I toss this here in every month because I just to get a general idea how the stock market is doing in general. So this is a chart for the SPY, the S&P 500 basically, and we're about at the all-time high right about now. It might be down just a tad bit. I'm not sure what the all-time high was. But if you look here, the 20-day moving average, I like to see how things are going with the 20-day moving average. Not that I'm going to buy or sell and try to time the market. I just like to see what the trend is. And this is the Bollinger Band, so the upper level and the lower level. It's the standard deviation of the stock market going up and down. So typically the price stays within the bands and sometimes it bounces out. So it gives you an idea like how things are going. So at this point, I wouldn't think that the market would drop below 590. And at this point, I wouldn't think that it would rise too much above 632, which is like the upper band. So if I look down here, the RSI relative strength index, when it gets high, it means the market is oversold. But if you look back all the way here, it's been pretty high for quite a while. If it gets up around 80, then it's really oversold. And that might be a time to sell if you like to time the market. I don't really try to time the market. I'm in here for the income, not for the fun of trying to time things. So my prediction for the next couple weeks, I think we will stay steady unless there's major news about tariffs, but let's keep moving on here. So, what has happened in the last 2 weeks? Last week, I said I didn't make a video because the information didn't get to me in time, but I bought 50 shares of AIPI, and AIPI is still paying 35% return on the price that it's selling for now. So, my average cost basis, if I jump back here, my average cost is $48.74, but the price is $43.50. So it's paying 35%, not the 48. But if I figured out the rate of return on the 48, I'm still earning like 30%, which nobody should complain about. So the net asset value is going up. I want to get my costs down a little bit because I still believe that AIPI is a very good fund, and I just think that's the thing to do. Although a few weeks ago, I was just going to keep adding the QQQI, which I'll still continue to add to, but I might try to get AIPI up to 750 shares, then jump back to buying some QQQI. But this whole thing also, I'm going to try to keep my margin below 70,000 for now, and I'll talk about that more in a few minutes. So anyhow, that's what happened. I bought some more shares of AIPI, and I'll probably add another 100 shares in the next month or so. So what has happened in the past week or two? So today, $640 distribution for QDTE, and last Friday, 618. On July 6th, I had to pay margin interest, $314. People look at this say, oh my gosh, you're paying $300 a month in margin interest. So that 70,000 in margin that I have, if you figured I'm averaging maybe earning, let's say, anywhere from 25 to 30% off that 70,000, and if you figured in the interest that I'm paying of $300, if you do the math, that 70,000 is probably returning me about $1,500 a month. And of that 1,500, I have to pay 300 in the margin interest. So it's making me 1,200. So I'm netting $1,200. if you could go borrow 70,000 from the bank and pay them $300 a month, and then you turn around, invested that 70,000, and somebody's paying you $1,500, you take that $1,500 to the bank, pay off your 300 and then pocket the other 1,200. Does that make sense? It makes sense to me, but I don't know. What if the market goes belly up? I did do a hiccup here recently and nothing horrible happened. So, well, we'll see. Somebody might be laughing at me a year from now, or in the meantime, I'll just keep depositing those distributions and go about my business here. Anyhow, so here's history, what's happening each month. So November, 3,500, December, 5,900. There's some special capital gain type things. I think they had to pay out extra dividends. Anyhow, you look at the average, it's between probably like 3,000 to 3,500, depending on how many Fridays are in a month. Because if there's 5 Fridays in a month, QDTE pays that extra week. So that makes it an extra $600 or so. So this month for July, this is the June totals. Down here is July. There'll be 4 Fridays. So I'm expecting the dividends to be right around 3,000 to 3,100 or so. I did buy some more AIPI and I have bought some SPY-I. The dividends might be just a little bit more. Hopefully that creeps up each month as I buy more shares. The dividends will grow. That's how this whole thing is supposed to work. So we'll see. This slide here, it was my projection at the beginning. So this all was created week 1. And if you look down here at July 11th, which is today, I would have projected I'd be at 92,000 of cool cash. I'd be using $69,000 in margin, and I have a total invested 161,000. I projected that my account would be growing at 0.75% per month. Total, I projected I'd be up 31% so far. I also estimated that I would be using about 75% of my equity as a margin, if I said that right. So basically, margin 69,000 is about 75% of the 92,000. So that's what my goal was. Over here is what really is happening. You can see I started out here really great. I was at 79,000 within a few months, and I thought I might be retired by now. I am retired, but then tariffs happened, all the bad stuff happened. It was down to 49,000. I was thinking to myself, like, people are getting a kick out of that. They're watching me lose up $70,000, like in the stock market by using margin, just like everybody said I would. But I was patient, didn't panic. And this money is money that I can afford to lose. Don't tell my wife that, but I don't think she watches these videos, so she doesn't know. But anyhow, I was down to 49,000 and it slowly has been creeping back up. And you see I'm up to 78,000 now. Not quite where I was in February before everything went crazy, but doing okay. And so margin, I'm using about as much margin as I expected to be using at this point, 69,000. If you look at this last column, instead of being at 75%, I'm at 89%. So you can see I was all the way up to 127%. So I do want to keep this like as close to 75% as I can, but I'm okay keeping it around 90% here if I can keep picking up more shares at a decent price. So total amount I have invested is 147,000. That's the equity plus the margin. And over here, I said I wanted this to grow at 0.75% per week. People said, no way, you can't do that because that comes up to be like 3.5% per month, and that's 40% per year. You can't do that. That's crazy talk. You should have your head examined. Well, that all might be true, but that's what I did. So even though had a slow week, 0.63%, it's not that far off from the 0.75% that I would need to average to keep these numbers. And if it wasn't for this really major down week here, I would probably be close to where I thought it would be. So we're up almost 12% since I started this whole project, and I'm pretty happy. Would I be up almost 12% if I just had invested this money into the S&P 500 back in November? It's a good question. I'd have to go back and check. Probably. I'd probably be up like 12%, but we'll see. Now, this is about comparing the income to what that rental house would have did. So the rental house, this is what it's been doing. Each month I collect $700 in rent. I pay insurance. I pay taxes, let's say. And then also, I assume that this rental house, the equity would grow at 4% per year, which equals about $233 per month. And people ask me every month or send me comments, says, how about maintenance, repairs, and stuff? Well, at the end of the year, I'll make a video and I'll throw in the average cost of maintenance, repairs, and things for the past 3 years and see how that works out. I thought the ETFs would be way ahead, and I think it will end up being that way. So I didn't include these extra nitpicky little nickels and dimes to this calculation. But anyhow, if the rents minus the taxes and insurance, if I'd put that money in the bank account, I would have $3,700 right now, just grows each month. And then with the equity growth of $233 per month, my equity would be $72,097. If you add those together, the house plus the equity would be worth about almost 76,000. So how does that compare to the ETFs? There we are, 75,877, and the ETFs at 78,148. So the ETFs are ahead by $2,200 at this point. So we'll wait and see how that works out. And we'll get to around November. So we still have like 4 or 5 months to go for the year. I'm hoping this will be up like 5,000 or something. We'll see. Okay, this video went long. I had 2 weeks worth of stuff to talk about, and we will wrap it up. And be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you again next week with another update.